Dr. Gary Schnitkey, he doesn't need an introduction, but sometimes this is a place where you ease up to a guy and you say things about him that need to be said in case you didn't know. The Soybean Industry Endowment Chair at the Ag Strategy within the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Economics at the University of Illinois. His activation focuses on farm and risk management on Corn Belt grain crops. He analyzes factors causing differences in profitability across farms and develops ways of mitigating risk on farms. He writes the weekly Farm Economics article that appears each Tuesday in the FarmDoc Daily website, and he is an extremely nice guy. Is that what you wrote?
I did write that.
That's great. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Gary Schnitkey, say hi.
How many of you have written a check in the first part of the year? And most people don't write checks anymore, right? So I'm already aging myself. Write a check and you write the last year's date on that, right? So I've done that on this slide. Managing 2021 input price uncertainties. And we can manage that a lot easier because we know what it was. But that's what happened here. And again, we're going to start this year, and I'm going to start this day, and I'm going to go over a couple things. And I'm going to focus first a lot on fertilizer because that's the item that that I would say is going to go up and has gone up and probably isn't going to come down as much as we would like going into the 2022 season. Transition that into a bit of other cost and then talk about income. And I'm going to tell you right now, income for 2022 could be average or better if we keep these prices where they're at. So we're not looking, even though we're looking at much higher cost and a much higher break-even prices to get to income levels, there's still a very good possibility that 2022 will be a profitable year. Probably not as profitable as 2021. And my guess is that most of you, if you've done your income statements, 2021 turned out to be a very good year, perhaps even the best year that we've seen. And we're probably not going to see that in 2022 because all those price hits happened during that year, but we got most of the 22 production costs on before the majority of those costs hit. And then we are going to do something that we're going to talk a little bit about beyond 2022 and where some of these costs may go. And that's obviously more speculative, maybe not even more speculative, but that's where we're going here. So we're going to start out with fertilizer cost. And this graph takes us up to the first week of 2022. And in the first, actually that would be the 13th. If you're looking at the anhydrous ammonia price on the 13th, Illinois production cost reported that at $1,486 per ton. There is some good news to that price. It didn't go up from the previous 2 weeks before. So maybe we got to look for some good news someplace, right? But 1486 obviously is an all-time high. It surpassed what we have had happen by large margins in 2008, and there isn't anything before 2008 that was even close to 1486. All costs have gone up, but there may be reason to believe that we've reached our highs, but I would not expect those costs to come down much going into our production season for 2022. Probably reached the point where they're not going to go up more, but looking for large decreases in those prices is probably not something that's going to happen in the 2022 season. Just to give you a feel here, I'm just going to go through a calculation of 2021 cost, fertilizer cost per acre, and 2022 cost. I'm going to use requirements that are replacement for phosphorus and potash, and I'm using the MRTN, maximum return to nitrogen rates for this area. 234 would have been what it was for last year, and this year it would be setting something at anhydrous ammonia at 207. That is in pounds of anhydrous ammonia, and then that again is based on the MRTN. Last year, if we were looking at costs sort of in 432 for anhydrous ammonia. That was in October 2020. 2 years ago, October 2020. We come up with cost of $94 per acre. That doesn't include lime and some other things that go into that. That also is using anhydrous ammonia as our major source of fertilizer. If we're using nitrogen, if we're using nitrogen solutions, those are going to go higher than that. 94 was last year. Soybeans was 46, and then if we look at this year, at $1,400, we're looking at $232 a cost. So you can see and again, that's at $1,400 of anhydrous ammonia, so we went up from 100 basically to 232. Again, that's at $1,400 of anhydrous ammonia, and there's going to be a lot of variation in nitrogen cost across farmers this year. And this year, if you were good or lucky, whichever your point of view is, and got it priced earlier in the fall, you're likely to have prices less than that, $1,400. Some people have had it considerably less, sort of in the $700 to $800 per ton range, which seemed high at that point in time. But so we're going to see a lot of variation in nitrogen fertilizer cost across farms. That's a $138 difference, and soybean fertilizer costs are going up as well. One of the things that we may want to consider, probably most of us have our dry fertilizers, our P&K on already. But if we're looking at that moving forward and we have any sort of leeway, we might have soil test levels above where they're needed. We might want to back off of that for a year or two and see where these things settle out. I'm going to go through now. All right, this is anhydrous ammonia cost, and you all know this, and many of you have told me this before, but I'm going to confirm something that you all know. This is anhydrous ammonia cost. Again, that's the same price series that you've seen before. Here's natural gas price. And natural gas is the major cost ingredient going into nitrogen fertilizer. You use natural gas in the production process to make anhydrous ammonia. It's a very key part of the process. You will see there natural gas prices and anhydrous ammonia prices, and they are correlated, right? That is, natural gas goes up, so does the price of anhydrous ammonia. Here's the other item here, and this is corn price, corn dollars per bushel, and anhydrous ammonia prices as well. So that just shows you corn price and what anhydrous ammonia prices have done. So if you see $5 corn, would you expect anhydrous ammonia to be higher or lower? So what we did was we developed a model of that anhydrous ammonia price and took those things into consideration. And here's what we found, and you knew this already. Corn price is more important than natural gas in explaining what is going on in anhydrous ammonia. And you can make many arguments for why that is the case, demand for nitrogen fertilizer, greed, whatever you want to say. But that is the case. And it's more important than natural gas in determining in looking at what anhydrous ammonia prices are. In November 2021, last November, if we use this little model, we actually have that anhydrous ammonia price is $400 over what corn and natural gas would say they are. So this model works really well until we get to November last year. All right, you can see here it's following it's really well, and then it just goes off the charts in November. And there's a more close-up look of that. So what happened in November? Well, there's a number of things that you could lay your hands on, I suppose. Probably the biggest, though, is that there was a supply disruption because of Hurricane Ida in the Gulf that shut some anhydrous ammonia plants and caused that spike. In any case, though, there's a $400 compared to that, $400 premium built into the market compared to our model results, and the question is, will that $400 go away? And my answer to that is maybe some, but don't expect anything under $1,200 per ton on that anhydrous ammonia price. And I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't go down at all. First and foremost, we're looking at higher prices now than in November for corn. And remember that anhydrous ammonia follows that corn price. And a couple other things, and so there's not an incentive for that price to come down much. All right? It may come down some, but as long as we have corn $5 and above, don't expect anhydrous ammonia to be much, to be coming down very much. There are some other considerations in why that anhydrous ammonia price may be up at elevated levels now. One is that natural gas outside the United States is very high. And if you go to Europe, it's much higher than it is here in the United States. And if anything, fertilizer companies have more of an incentive to move fertilizers outside the United States than in the United States, because there's more profitability out there. And they're animals. And there are also countervailing duties in place. So all of those suggest that we're not going to have much change in natural gas prices from now until when you have to make decisions. Here is what I suspect. From now until when you plant, there's going to be a high relationship between anhydrous ammonia prices and corn and soybean prices. And the corn and soybean prices are going to adjust so that it is profitable for you to plant corn. All right, so that margin between corn and soybeans is going to be such that when we look at budgets, it's going to say corn looks like a profitable alternative. All right? That relationship could and may likely go away once the crops are planted, because the market doesn't have to adjust prices to get corn acres and soybean acres anymore. So once the corn and soybeans are in the ground, those relationships won't hold as strongly as they did before. So here is my suggestions. If you are going to plant more soybeans, price those additional soybean bushels, because it's profitable right now. If you're going to make a decision because of price, do make some of those pricing decisions. If you're going to buy expensive nitrogen, price some of that corn. Again, because both of those decisions, you're going to make that decision, offset some of that risk by pricing corn. And I would also suggest you price more than the usual amount of 22 crops. And again, I am, and listen to Matt Bennett and other people, and they'll tell you more than I can tell you where prices are going. But I'll tell you that your break-even prices for corn and soybeans are much higher than they were in years past. So, and we are, according to my budgets, and my guess is your budgets as well, going to see profitability at the prices offered now, given that we get normal yields. Let's price some of that crop. Those crop prices could be higher in the fall if we have any sort of supply disruption, drought. But that's why you take crop insurance and RP, right? So that you got that production there. So our strategies here, coming forward, if you're still in the applying nitrogen business, didn't get it in the fall, which is our first two strategies dealt with that, I would suggest before planting, applying at most of 75% of the MRTN before planting, and then see what happens till after in the summer. So split applying, waiting to see if those prices come down. All right, see where we're at, and sort of, and this is just a sort of a standard risk management strategy. Break up the cost. All right. The other thing that I would suggest is, if possible, if we've used 28% or 32% in the past, try and get more of it on as anhydrous ammonia, because that's going to be much cheaper this year than any other year, because it just is. So think about those alternatives, and obviously that's going to vary on your situation. And the final thing, though, and I think this is important, is that we actually do reduce the rate of nitrogen going on. I am showing here, and the orange bar would be the MRTN for this area. And this would be at $400 a ton. We would be saying put on 209 pounds at $1,400 a ton, 162 pounds. And that's just a model that they came up with that's supposed to be finding the maximum return, highest profitability. So if we're looking at these high prices, then think about lowering that rate. And one of the things that we also do know is that many farmers apply above those rates for a variety of reasons. This might be the year to find out if those rates are really needed, because if you haven't paid for it already, at least put some check strips in and see if those rates are needed. So that's nitrogen. Pesticides, there likely will continue to be supply issues with glyphosate and glyphosate, and those are all related to COVID, China container issue, Hurricane Ida, and again, expect large increases in cost, prices and cost. And I would not expect those to ever come back down. Once they're in place, it's kind of hard to see anything ever coming back down. So one of the things that's happening now is we're ratcheting up our cost levels, and costs go up easier than they come down, right? Prices and costs come up to do easier. And we will most likely have to reevaluate our pesticide programs in light of large cost increases. Here's a suggestion that I'll tell you right now is a joke. That's a row cultivator. We had a hard time finding a row cultivator I know it's a joke because you can't do it, and even if you wanted to try and do it, you couldn't find the piece of equipment. So there you go. So here's where we're at budget-wise, and I'm currently using fall bids of $525 for corn, $12.50 for soybeans, and this would be a central Illinois area, and I'm having yields in there at 220 bushels per acre for corn, 68 bushels for soybeans. Our fertilizer cost right here, our 230 is based on a $1,400 ammonia price. If we got it on in the fall, that's great. We upped pesticides, and that doesn't include any sort of rescue treatment here. And our costs are going to be much higher in 2022 than they were in any year previous to that. And even with that $230 in there at $525 and $12.50, we still have corn budgeted at a higher return than soybeans. All right, and again, we've seen that relationship pretty much hold throughout the fall. We need corn acres as much as we need soybean acres, so those corn and soybean prices are going to likely adjust so that corn in this part of the world is as profitable or more profitable than soybeans. Having said that, once we get past the planning decision, that relationship is now due to weather and other sorts of things going on. In any case, here is what that budget looks like. Corn versus soybeans in 2022 in particular, much less than we did in 2021, and we're building in cash rent increases into that. So all of these costs are going up, but you'll still notice that those bars in 2022 are better than the bars in 2014 through 2018. So we're still, and I got high prices in there, right? So high prices, normal crop, even given where we're at cost-wise, still results in profitability. Much less profitability than last year, but still profitability. I would also point out, though, that we are dramatically increasing cost. Our figures would say that for 2022, we're looking at over 1,000 bushels, or excuse me, 1,000 bushels, $1,000 per acre for a corn acre in central Illinois as far as cost. That's based on a $309 cash rent, but we are looking at cost on average cash rent land of over $1,000 per acre. That's up at least $100 from a year ago, and more than that in most cases. Here's what, and again, $5.50, $5 corn works. We're coming up with a break-even price of $4.70 for corn. And that would be at a 220 bushel yield, $4.70. So $5.50 works, right? $4.50 doesn't if we have normal crops. And $4.70 will be the highest break-even price. You'll see a spike there in 2012, that's the drought year. If we took the crop insurance payments in, we would be below that 471. But 471 is where we're at. So if you're looking at prices of $5.50, we're still profitable. We get down to $4.80, we're marginal. If we get below that, and normal yields, we'll be less well off. I think Matt and others will talk about where they are looking at price-wise moving forward, but that's achievable, right? We got those prices now, but there's no guarantee of that coming in fall. Here's the same graph for soybeans, and we're coming up with close to $800 of cost, including cash rent. Including cash rent, $309. Obviously, how each farm turns out on that will depend on their individual farm's cash rent, share rent, own line situation. And that results in $11.06, $11 break-even price for soybeans. Again, we're getting those prices now, but that's much higher, obviously, than we have been in recent years. So have to recalibrate here. All right, I'm going to do one of the last thing on this year. This is where we think, or this is our projection. This is net income on FBFM in farms, grain farms enrolled in FBFM. We're coming up with a projection of $325,000 for last year. A very good year because of high prices and the cost were not in there yet. At very high prices, $5 and $12 soybeans, we come up with $130,000 of income. Much lower than last year, but still a reasonable income, right? All right, so what you get concerned about is if we see those prices come down, And that shows 480 corn and 1050 soybeans. We're sort of back here to normal, or actually $57,000 in income. And then our nightmare scenario, $4 corn and $10 soybeans, where we were at for many years before. That would not be good. And by the way, so we've ratcheted all these, the needed prices moving forward up considerably. And again, this year it looks like we're gonna have that opportunity to get those prices. So here, finally, is my suggestion: hedge more grain, continue to buy up on crop insurance. This is, I mean, and most people in this room probably buy 80 to 85% RP. That's a fine place to be. It gives you, if we get a 550 projected price, that's a good place to be. And you might even think about buying up some more with ECO, SCO, or your favorite buy-up option. This doesn't seem to be the year to be backing off of that. I would suggest do not change your rotations and lower nitrogen rates. And again, where we're sitting right now, 2022 looks like it could be a profitable year. So let's take that profitable year, build in some risk management, and then worry about 2023. Okay? That would be my suggestions. Here, beyond 2022. Now this is my thoughts, and we're getting very speculative here. I'm going to set the stage a little bit. Our income, we are looking at an economy that is going pretty good. We're looking at, believe it or not, our last GDP rating was 4.5%. We're seeing the economy grow. You can see there the impacts of COVID, the decrease, then the increase, and now we're up here at 4.5%, and hopefully that's going to continue in the future. We have strong demand for goods in this country. One of the things that we've also seen is a total change in the supply system. And if you look at people's buying behavior, it has changed. All right, and that's a lot of why we're having supply disruptions right at this moment. Right, we've seen that change, and one of the best indicators of that is what's going on at Long Beach. This is containers coming into Long Beach, and you can see here's COVID, and we reached new and higher levels, and they were barely able to handle what they had before, and we're there. And will they get that worked out? Yep. When will they get that worked out? Not before you plant a crop in 2022. Hopefully by 2023, most of our supply problems will be worked out. But it's going to be an adjustment process through there. The unemployment rate has fallen considerably in the United States, and it's now 3.9%, the last reading, and that was slightly higher than just before the COVID, but it's still at a very low level. However, we have very low unemployment. The number of workers in this country have not reached pre-COVID levels. And here's what's happened. Old people like me decided, not old. Old people like me decided, I've had enough fun through this COVID experience and I'm going to leave. That's part of what's going on. The other part of the workforce that's having more difficulty or coming back is women with children, school-age children. And those individuals, think about what COVID did to them. If you have a school-age children, you don't know tomorrow if you're going to school, you're providing schooling that you probably didn't want to do in the first place, or I don't, that, or you know, and that brunt falls on those moms, and a lot of those are leaving the workforce. All right. So I would expect that workforce is never going to get back to. COVID has taken that workforce down. And my guess is that most of you in this room have had some problem with finding employees, right? Join the club. It's not going to get any better, all right? Just our demographics, there's far fewer younger people in this world than there were when the baby boomers came through. Finding employees is going to be a problem forever. Now here's a good thing. If you're a younger person, you're going to have a job, right? You're going to have a job, but finding employees is going to be an issue forever. Against that, we've had this inflation, and last time we saw that was 7.1%, which is really high. And you have to go back to the 1970s to find a 1980s, excuse me, to find a similar period. And the one thing that I've discovered is that the students in my class haven't lived through the 1980s, right? So there's a lot of not knowing about what an inflationary environment looks like. And so we'll see if that inflation, if this is transitory or not. But here is one area where I do not think it's transitory, and that's labors and wages. John Deere, to settle a strike last fall, put in a cost of adjustment into their contract. All right? They did that because they needed the workers, right? Labor and any product that depends on labor is not coming down. All right? It's not coming down, and we're going to have continuing labor issues for the foreseeable future. I mean, it's not going to go away. We don't have the size of the workforce that we did before, and COVID reduced it. And everyone is going to have difficulty finding employees, and farmers are no exception to that. Farm credit has problems with that as well. There's just not the people out there. So you're going to see, so this is what has happened to your prices for tractors in the last, you'll notice it went up considerably. It's not coming down. It may flatten out. One of the reasons why it went up so much last year is because everybody wanted to buy equipment, right? Tax shelter, and the equipment wasn't out there. That is not going to go away. So here's my look at longer run supply issues. Labor shortages, everyone is going to be looking for employees, and that's not going to change soon. We're going to continue to see seed cost increases, seed price increases 8 to 10%. Pesticides, they will moderate, but they're never going to decline unless we see corn prices back to $4, which would be very bad. Equipment is going to continue to increase simply because of the labor involved with that. And fertilizer will likely come down in 2013 because it's up there a ways, and there's issues associated with that, but the other costs are likely to stay there. And by coming down on, if we have the prices where we're at, we're talking anhydrous ammonia in the $900 per ton range, not in the $1,400. Finally, I'm going to give you, all right, we've had inflation. Are we going to see your interest rates increase? That's the question. And I'm going to paint you a different situation here. Here's their 10-year Treasury rate. It's right at 1.41% in December. Here is what you could buy a tip treasury. If you bought a tip treasury, your expected yield is on that would be minus 0.99%. Which, by the way, if you buy this and you consider inflation, it's a negative real return, right? So you can cut it off with that tip, and there is what inflation is going to be. Right now, the market is saying they're expecting inflation to be 2.4% in the future, and our current rates are 7.1. And I would actually expect those to that inflation rate to come down a bit. But given where we are at on the labor side, something in that high 2, 3, 4 range seems reasonable to me moving forward. But here's where I think we're at. I don't think we're going to see large increases in nominal interest rates for the foreseeable future. And the Fed is going to work heavily on keeping those as low as possible. And the reason why that is if it would be very bad for our national balance of payments or budget situation if those interest rates ever rise. We obviously have a much larger debt now than we ever have, and it works now because we have very low interest rates. So we're going to see there's large policy incentives for that not to incur, and inflation's going to go up, but your real return on any debt instrument is going to be low. So I would expect nothing to change for 2022 because there's no crisis. Land prices are going to stay where they're at. They're probably not going to increase as much as they have in the past. But if you're thinking of a place to put money, you want to put it in the stock market? This has the same problem as land. And do you want to put it in a debt instrument, a CD, tip, where you're guaranteed a negative return? And that's sort of the situation we're at, and the situation we're going to be in until there's some sort of crisis that changes that. So, here's where we're at. 2022 has a very good chance of being profitable. Cost will be very high, and there's a chance for fertilizer to moderate into 2023, and other costs are not likely to decline for a while. But we have a chance for a very good 2022 year if we can keep these prices high, and so taking some risk management right now seems like a good alternative. With that, I appreciate your time. Yeah. As Jeff said, you have to be looking for a job to be considered unemployed. So a lot of the people are no longer looking for work, and so they're not considered unemployed. And that's why the number looks the way it does. So 3.9%, you think number seems low, but there's a whole lot of people not looking for work.
All right. If you're laying on the couch watching The Price is Right eating Cheetos, you're not unemployed. You're just not working. More questions? Anybody anywhere? Okay, here's one for you, and I don't mean to put you into politics, but I'm just curious. The monetary policies that we have seen, could the midterm change that if the Congress swings, or is the administration in control and to remain in control as this vote floats?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'll give you my answer. I do not see the Fed changing its policy, and it doesn't matter who's in power. And the reason, and remember, the Fed has dual roles: keep inflation low, but also keep the economy going. And those two don't necessarily go together very well, because if you raise interest rates, which would cause inflation to come down, you also now have this large problem on the other side that you would likely cause a recession. Because as we increase interest rates, federal spending would go well up, because interest rates, as they go up, the funding of the debt would become much larger. And so there will be large incentives for monetary policy to be accommodative on interest rates until they're forced not to be, or our federal situation gets to the point where deficit spending is a lot less, which doesn't appear to me to be anything that anybody is interested in. So I think we have accommodative, or the policy that we have, and if you're a Fed, you can't hardly do anything else. You're kind of stuck there.
Again, we've got time for one more. Yes, sir.
So the model you created with the anhydrous price and the natural gas price.
Yep.
Can you use futures markets and say what like a reasonable price is for like this fall or beyond, or is it more continuous?
So our model would say that prices are going to come down in the spring. It would say that they're going to come down. I have never tried to run it out into the fall. Having said that, I'm not sure how much I trust the model, given that there was that large blip at the end, right? So it's sort of, the predictive power went away. But it would say, that model would say our anhydrous ammonia prices should be right at between $1,000 and $1,100. And I listen to fertilizer companies, and they don't seem too interested in lowering their price because they believe you're going to buy it, and they believe you're going to put it on, which is one of the reasons why I think lowering rates is pretty critical in sending a signal for the future.
Okay. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Jeff spoke of climate in his beginning, and in your slides, I didn't see anything on climate in terms of maybe carbon credit. Do you see this as an expense to a farmer, or do you see this as a revenue opportunity?
So carbon, right now, you would say that we're trying to make it a revenue opportunity. That sort of has stalled, though, because Build Back to Better didn't get passed, right? If Build Back to Better would have, or some sort of legislation got passed, we would have seen carbon as a revenue source. Well, it's stalled. Where I see most people at, and I see a number of companies offering carbon credits to you, and they, like you, are trying to figure out how to make this work, and it's hard because it's very difficult to really measure carbon, right? You can say that these practices should increase carbon in the soil, and in the end, it's kind of hard to ever discover if they do or not. But there's less incentive right now to make carbon markets work because the legislation didn't pass.
What I thought was interesting last week with Secretary Vilsack, and we pinned him down to the media, I was a part of that group. He still is of the attitude, Doc, that carbon is going to be a commodity. And until you can give a definition of what that commodity is, I'm not sure where it goes. $20 a ton is what I've heard the most of. Is that close to what you've heard?
Yeah, so $20 a ton, and if we believe the models, that gets you a $10 payment. All right, here in this part of the world, if you do some cover crops and do reduced tillage, a $20 per ton credit gets you something in the 10-ish range. Are you going to change your $10 per acre? Are you going to change your behavior for $10 per acre? And my answer is, if you had another program that paid you $20 an acre to put cover crops, probably, but $10 is probably not going to change much behavior.
Well, the administration has made a bunch of promises for what they're going to do on climate, and now they're looking for a way to facilitate that. I find it interesting that Ms. Stamenow and the Growing Climate Solutions Act was coming up with dollars to be designated toward conservation programs, but not guaranteeing any particular return, leaving that to USDA. But just as Gary suggested, how many times have you heard lately in the headlines, Mr. Bonney talking about creating a carbon bank and using CCC funds? It ain't been happening.
It hasn't been happening, and I don't know, so the carbon, using CCC is what got us MFPs, right? So that's the process that got us MFPs. Can they make a carbon bank out of that? I suppose they could.